now. This is our first trip to Ireland of the day. And I'd like to say our next guest is Sean Weafer. And we're going to be looking at how prolonged periods of separation and change can take a toll on any professional or team's motivation and productivity. And I know Sean is an international leadership coach and mentor, and that includes specialising in sales and leadership communications, as well as driving team and individual performances. Sean, are you there, my lovely?
I am indeed, Nadine. Can you hear me okay?
I can. I do love an Irish. You could say nonsense and I'd be impressed.
Well, that might be most of my presentation afternoon, so you're okay. That's good.
I'm sure it won't be. So remember to keep your questions coming in, and if you've got a question for Sean, put down Sean's name. And how are things with you, Sean, in Ireland?
Oh, good. Enjoying a lovely sunny day here in Dublin town. So all set and enjoying all our presentations. I want to thank all the speakers we've had so far today. I want to thank you for a wonderful job as a remote MC. It's always a challenging job. And of course, to the guys in Speakers Corner for helping us put all this together for you.
Oh, you're so polite. You'll go far in life.
Thank you very much.
Sean, your time starts. Good luck.
Okay, thank you, Nadine. I want to thank earlier Graham's presentation. Was concise. It was also scary. The fact that we're going to face this kind of disruption from now on is something we all need to be aware of. And this issue of motivation is something I want to talk about because it goes to the heart of human behaviors, either as leaders or indeed in the space of sales. So one of the major issues we're facing in the current crisis is that managers now have to cope with what we call a blended managed environment. So huge has been the change in our work environments. This blended management environment is how we now need to manage people and indeed sell to people, which is even more challenging in this situation where people are working remotely or they're working virtually, or you'll also have a mix of people who, as time progresses, will be working from the office as well. So how do we cope with this? And the one thing that massive change like this is guaranteed to do is seriously impact on your level of motivation, your desire to make change or to get things done. So what I want to do in this very short presentation is talk a little about motivation, the types of motivation, why it's important, the sort of things that impact on that, and what we can do to massively drive it. Because as a leader, it's critically important that you're not only capable of motivating yourself, but you're capable of motivating the team. And particularly now, the team is distributed and working from home, or as Graham said, working from anywhere, as the case may be. And this will be the new normal. So these are the skill sets that in the past leaders may not have required in terms of motivation, because they would have used a very different style of management. They would have used what we call the old masculine style, the command and control style. They would have been called directors because they directed people to. No longer. Today, we need to become much more effective at facilitation, at coaching, and at orientating people in a powerfully effective way and aligning their own personal motivation with the goals of the organization or of the team. So what is motivation? What drives it? I like to call motivation in action. It means you have a clear purpose, a clear outline, and then you have to power that focus or that outcome with your emotions. Now, in our physiological systems, we have a thing called our neurology. And our neurology is where our emotions run. So it's critically important. It's one thing having a clear focus, but unless that focus has a passionate impetus behind it, a real powerful value for getting there, we're very, very unlikely to make that change. So motivation is when we put a motive together with the energy or the power or the emotional resonance needed to drive that objective to its final conclusion. So, is motivation important for a leader? Why is motivation important for a salesperson? Well, from a leader, we have two things we have to worry about. One, we have to motivate ourselves. In the current crisis, there's been lots of things to depress our motivation, affect our motivation, and I'll go through some of those a little later on. But here's the other thing. We don't just have to motivate ourselves. We also have to motivate our team. We have to maintain their consistent performance when now we're working with them at a distance. We're working with them in virtual environments. We're working with them and constantly on Zoom calls and becoming Zoomified in the process. And what's really important is our motivation immediately and directly impacts on theirs. And here's why. Our expectations of leaders drive the behaviors of our team members. And the reason is, if we as a leader or manager come across as demotivated or unfocused, our teams model our behavior. They want to be like us because they know that we will judge them or make an assessment of them at some point in the future. So they're looking to build trust and rapport with us. So often they will motivate the behaviors that we express ourselves. So our motivation needs to be high in order to set the expectations to get the best out of our teams. From a salesperson's perspective, well, I think we're all aware of the professional salesperson world. They live lives of constant rejection, interspersed by moments of blissful triumphs. Well, those blissful triumphs have become further and harder and fewer in the modern world, because as we're trying to find new models of how we engage with brand new clients, it's driven that motivation down to its lowest depth. So we need to find ways to improve that from our sales perspective, because sales absolutely are the lifeblood of business. No sale, no business. That's what happens. So let's talk about the types of motivation that we face. And for this, we come back to a concept by a well-known, in fact, the father of psychoanalysis, called Sigmund Freud. And Freud said that people move away from pain and toward pleasure. So we move away from difficult, dangerous, challenging situations, and we move towards more pleasurable, stable situations. Now, there is a small proviso to this, and this is this. People usually don't like change. In fact, our unconscious mind will work against us to make change happen unless we give it a sufficiently pleasurable, beneficial reason in order to make that change. How do I know this? Well, part of my training is as an analytical hypnotherapist and as a psychotherapist. So I know what motivates people deep down in terms of their professional selves. So this concept is that moving away from pain and toward pleasure leads us into two fundamental areas. And just talking about management, traditional management used what we call away from or pain-based motivation. It was sort of beatings will continue until morale improves type approach. And that was fine as long as the team was immediately around you. You could see them, you control them, you could touch them. But in today's distributed world, that doesn't work anymore. We have to find ways in which we facilitate or we coach or we get with people, we work as advisors to our team members in order to help them build their motivation and put really powerful, positive reasons why they should do things for us as a team. Now, the away from motivation is where we want to get away from something. There's a pain situation, so we want to move away from that. Now, that has a place when it comes to self-care or protecting ourselves. We need to move away from dangerous situations quickly. But the problem with using that kind of motivation in leadership or sales is that it's short-term and it's high pressure. It does not last in the longer term, and it does not drive long-term performance. So the kind of motivation we're looking for is toward motivation, where we build this powerful, pleasurable reason for us to get to a particular point in time. That kind of motivation is much more internally focused, and it's longer term and far more positive, particularly in terms of our physiology. High stress causes cortisol to be released in the body. That dampens our immune systems and makes us tired and fatigued and therefore less driven to affect change. It also means that our immune system being dampened, we're more open to catching illnesses and becoming well in the process. But positive toward motivation, moving towards something that we perceive as pleasurable, as profitable, is a very different kind of motivation. And that's where individuals will take responsibilities for their own actions and drive themselves to get to where they need to do in order to drive the performance of the team. So these are the two things we need to think about: away from motivation or toward motivation, which is what we should be looking to develop in ourselves and in our teams. So what are the sort of things that damage our motivation? I think being aware of that is really, really important. So I want to talk about three things that damage our motivation. The first is lack of focus. So if we don't have a clear goal, if we don't have absolute clarity on where we want to go and what we want to do, and even more importantly, why we want to make that happen, what happens is we get into a period of confusion. We start creating a sense of helplessness around us. And the problem with helplessness, the problem with confusion, the problem with stress is that we revert to, we have a thing called recidivism. We fall back to doing what is comfortable for us. We go back to our comfort zones. We go back to what's easy for us. And I heard a wonderful quote. It said that, comfort zones are wonderful places, but nothing grows in them. And in today's world, with the amount of massive change we have to face, it's easy to sit back and let the world sort itself out before we engage. But the reality is we are the factors for change. Each and every individual one of us who go out there and affect another person's life, whether it's being of service to people in sales or of service to people in leadership, this is how change will happen. This is how we restore what we once had before. So we can't afford to have a lack of focus. We can't afford to feel confused. We can't afford to feel helpless. The other then is that issue of a lack of sense of control. And what this happens is it creates anxiety. And anxiety is fear of the future. So if we have a lack of focus and a lack of sense of control, we're not going to move things. We're not going to make change. We're not going to be motivated to make the difference we have to make in the world, particularly now as we seek to bring the world back to stasis. And the last element to be aware of in terms of these three things is isolation. Human beings are herd animals. Many of us are dying to get back to speaking to live audiences, connecting in networking events, talking over coffee with people, because that's what we need. We need human touch. And I talk to people about communications, but I say, actually, communications is not really what it's all about. I could communicate with you by shouting at you, but that doesn't mean you'll actually, pick up anything I want to say, or agree with me, or go along, or even be motivated by me. Now, in a human sense, we need to do what I call CIE. We need to connect, we need to influence, we need to engage. We need to create that level of human touch that makes such a radical difference and gets people to want to work with us to accomplish greater things. So the last thing I want to talk about is what I call the 6C model. So these are the things we need to be aware of and how we can boost our own motivation and the motivation of others that we have a responsibility for on our team or in our organization. So the first of those C's is what we call context. Context is our environment. It's what's happening around us. It's the period of change we're going through. And those periods of change cause us to do one of two things. It causes us to be reactive to the world rather than proactive. So if our world, as they currently stand, is that we're reacting, we're firefighting, we're driven by external circumstances, we can never be sufficiently proactive to make change. So to learn to become proactive means that we need to be aware of what's going on around us. But in order to make change, we need to go within. We need to go within ourselves and find out what are those points of motivation, those emotional elements that drive us to make the kind of change whereby we can change our external world. So understanding where your context is first. The second thing is we need to develop clarity. We need to be really clear about what our focus is for the future. And we need to be aware of it on two levels. We need to know what we want to do. And we need to know what our individual team members have to do. And then we need to know why. So knowing what we want to do gives us clarity. That's great. That's a logical reason to do something. But logic is useless unless it's powered by emotion. And emotion is the why. Emotion is the pleasure point. Emotion is the reason to fire up that motive to make change. So clarity is a key part. So context, environment, clarity, your focus is the key element. And what that does is it allows us to work in a situation whereby we can facilitate others, we can affect others, we can build powerful relationships with others, and we can motivate people to move, particularly when we create shared objectives or shared goals. The next thing once you've got a clear goal is to break that goal into its individual steps. What are the actions we need to take to make change? Sometimes goals can be so big they can be overwhelming, such as how do I deal with my team working from home? How do I handle this new environment? Well, the easiest way to do that is, okay, this is what I want. I want to more successfully manage my team, or I want to grow the level of clients I'm working with in the current environment because I want to secure my future, or because I want to build my recognition as a leader. So what are the steps that make that happen? Take time to break it into the smallest possible elements it could possibly be. Call Mary, set a meeting with Jeff, draft a list. The smaller you can make it, the greater the sense of control that you will have over what you do. And you'll suddenly find that even the greatest of goals, even the largest of objectives, can be reached by taking small steps. Now, here's the interesting thing. If you want to massively change your motivation, what you need to do is be clear about what you want to do and why. Understand what are the steps that make that happen, because now you have a sense of control. What does control do? It gives us a huge level of confidence. Confidence is powerful. Because when we're feeling confident, guess what? We become much more convincing in our communication. We become much more congruent. And guess what? Much more compelling when it comes to raising the boats of the people around us to accomplish the goals we can as an organization or as a team. So if our confidence rises, our ability, the fifth C, to communicate effectively, to connect with people, to involve with people, to engage with people, becomes absolutely compelling. That's when we become true leaders. That's when we become people want to buy stuff from. Nobody wants to buy anything from someone who appears desperate. Nobody wants to be led by someone who is unsure and not confident. They want a person who is assertive and assured and confident that where they're going is the right place. And when people see someone like that, they will follow you gladly into a process of co-creation and collaboration and synergy that will profoundly change the environment that they're in. And all of these, the context, the clarity, the control, the confidence, and the communication unerringly leads to a powerful delivery of competence or performance. These are what change things in difficult and challenging times. Motivation is not some woo-woo concept. It is something anyone can claim once they choose what they want and why it's compellingly important to them. Stay focused, stay positive, practice gratitude because it empowers positive elements in the brain. The brain, actually, interesting, is 7 times more susceptible to negative news than it is to positive news. And that's why it's more important that we listen to the positive elements. Cut down your news streams, manage your self-talk, communicate more effectively with your team by setting up WhatsApp or Slack groups. Texts are more effective than emails. Your Zoom group meetings, give other people responsibility to do that. There's so much you can do inside that 6C model around communication, clarity, and control. So all I can wish you is hopefully that's brought some value and the very best of luck in challenging times. And here's to the new normal.
Someone had to mention the 2 N's, the new normal. And you're so right, actually, that motivation word, which has been banded around over the years. But for me, getting through the last 3 or 4 months, it's all been down to what I wanted my motivation to do. And after digesting that news, for some people it took longer. It took me a couple of weeks to get over the fact that actually we might be in the long haul for this. So just get used to it and adapt and bring out that positivity. I know it's different for different people. People have different motivations. But I think motivation has been the key thing that certainly got me through this. And I know the other people that I've spoken to. So they're very wise words. And I also liked when you spoke about command and control structures. I mean, one would hope they're dying out now as the baby boomers, well, the Generation X's are still around. But as those millennials take over, they're used to those sort of flatter structures. And I think the last 3 or 4 months, we've seen those flatter structures having to take shape anyway, because people have had to have more control. Has that given people motivation in the clients that you've spoken to, that they've had to do it?
I think whether it's given them more motivation, I'm not sure it's given them more motivation. Obviously, as a coach working with managers and leaders and salespeople, motivation comes up a lot of the time. I think real challenge for them in terms of helping them with the motivation is around communications. People, when they're under pressure, tend to work in a much more dictatorial or director or command and control approach because they themselves are fearful. They themselves are lacking clarity. So the real skill, particularly now that everybody needs to be learning, how do I become more of an advisor to my team? So I wrote a book a number of years ago called A High Trust Advisor. So how do we build high levels of compelling engagement with people such that we now work with people in a collaborative manner, a synergistic manner, a co-creative manner? That's the key. And a lot of that comes from what's going on within ourselves. Are we clear? Are we sure? Are we confident? And do we have the communication skills necessary to do that? And where I find people fall down a lot around communications is in presenting, in networking, and in influencing language, like using questions effectively.
Yeah, indeed. And you use those questions effectively. I did notice that. I took note. Got a lovely comment here. Chandra from India loved the connect, influence, engage message for leaders to motivate their teams. And of course, the 6 C's. Sean, what did CIE stand for again? That's Gareth from Wales. Just wants a bit of clarity on that.
Yeah, C is connect. So do more than communicate. Don't do more than talking at people. Find ways of working out what's important to people. Connect with them. The better you can connect with them, the more you can influence them. And the more you influence them in a positive way, the more you engage with them. And you win loyalty, collaboration, and co-creation, and you accomplish amazing and fantastic things with your team.
Indeed. And on this Speakers Corner website, I noticed on your biography, it talks about you developing the High Trust Advisor leadership and sales programs, which you've mentioned, to turn experts into highly trusted advisors, collaborators, and co-creators in leadership and sales roles. And, you know, for you, what has been sort of the greatest success over the last 3 months?
I think learning how to use Zoom. It's a very different process than being yourself in the room. Particularly challenging as a conference speaker, where you're used to getting the energy from the audience. You see their reactions, see where you're going. In most cases, you're just looking at yourself, so you better like yourself if you're looking to educate. So Zoom is huge value, but I have to say it's been an interesting period of reflection in terms of who I am, what I do, where I go, and it's helped me finish a couple of new books I've been working on as well, which has been great.
Always motivated. Looking forward to those books. Sean, the best of luck, and give our love to Ireland. It's been lovely having you on the programme. Okay, well, we've got our last solo speaker before we finish.